It was a day like no other in the world of politics, a perfect storm of confusion, missteps, and unexpected revelations. Donald Trump, the man who had built a legacy on economic policies and America First rhetoric, stood at a podium, flanked by aides and advisors. The cameras clicked, the microphones buzzed, and the world waited for his next bold statement. But what came next? Well, it wasn't bold. It wasn't even coherent. It was a baffling moment of self-inflicted confusion as Trump stumbled over his own economic policies, a mistake that would go down in history as one of the most surreal moments of his presidency. Meanwhile, somewhere in the world of Fox News, Pete Hegseth, former military man and staunch conservative, decided to tackle a hot-button issue in a way that only Hegseth could. He'd previously gained attention for his outspoken views on the military, but this time, it wasn't his hard-nosed conservatism that grabbed the headlines. No, it was his shockingly out-of-touch embrace of what he called diet woke military reforms, a call to make the armed forces more inclusive, diverse, and, dare we say, woke. The military. Woke. Two stories, completely unrelated, yet both indicative of how the world of politics and media had evolved into a chaotic whirlpool of confusion, contradictions, and curious about-faces. Trump's tariff disaster and Hegseth's diet woke military were just the latest symbols of a political landscape teetering on the edge of self-doubt. The only question left was, how much longer could these contradictions hold before they all came crashing down? The scene was set for another press briefing at the White House. Donald Trump, always a master of the soundbite, had agreed to take questions about his signature economic policies, specifically his tariffs on China, tariffs that had caused international tension, sparked trade wars, and ultimately led to questions about the actual impact on American businesses. But instead of presenting a firm defense of his policy, Trump, ever the showman, had a moment of pure confusion. A reporter asked, "Mr. President, can you explain the purpose of your tariffs on China and whether they're benefiting the American economy?" Trump, looking slightly befuddled, shifted in his chair. "Well, the tariffs, they're really doing great, you know? They're doing fantastic things for American companies. I mean, I always knew tariffs would work. People said they wouldn't, but I was right. They're bringing in money, right? Just huge amounts of money." There was a pause. The reporter, sensing an opening, pressed further, "But are they helping American consumers or businesses, particularly with the higher costs of goods and reduced imports?" Trump hesitated. Right, but it's great for the economy. Trust me. We're going to win so much, you won't believe it." He blinked a few times, clearly grappling with the specifics. "I mean, some things, yeah, they cost a little more, but it's all for the long-term benefit. Big picture stuff. People just don't get it yet." The room was silent. A few aides shifted awkwardly behind him. It was a classic Trump moment, a contradiction wrapped in bravado, a leader who was so sure of his policies that he didn't feel the need to understand them fully. He didn't know the exact details. He didn't know how tariffs worked. But he did know they were fantastic. He'd made America great again, and that was all that mattered, right? As the reporters digested his words, the brief confusion turned into something more uncomfortable, a deep sense of doubt. The world wasn't buying his winning rhetoric anymore. A public figure who had made so much noise about trade wars was now struggling to explain how they benefited the very people he promised to protect. Trump had always been a master of creating a narrative, but this time, even he couldn't pretend to make sense of it. Meanwhile, in the world of cable news, Pete Hegseth, former Fox News anchor and veteran of the military, was making waves with a completely different kind of declaration. Hegseth, who had always been a staunch supporter of the military's role in America's strength, appeared on a segment discussing reforms within the armed forces. What no one expected, however, was Hegseth's sudden shift toward what could only be described as diet woke military reforms. He began calling for the military to embrace diversity and inclusivity at a level that seemed, well, a bit out of touch with the typical conservative ethos. "Look," he said with the same assuredness that had made him a conservative darling, "the military needs to evolve. We can't keep thinking of it as a boys' club. We need to bring in people from all walks of life. That means more diversity, more inclusion, and yes, even more focus on mental health. Let's get woke. Diet woke, okay? Not full-on liberal, but just enough to show the world we're in the 21st century." The audience was stunned. This was Pete Hegseth, an outspoken defender of traditional conservative values and the idea of a tough, no-nonsense military. And yet, here he was talking about making the military more inclusive, calling for a shift that some might have considered woke. "We need our soldiers to reflect the country we protect," he continued. "It's not just about fighting wars, it's about showing the world that we're progressive, that we're changing with the times. And we can still be strong and tough while doing it." The backlash was swift. Many conservatives who had followed Hegseth's career were appalled. "This is an embarrassment," one Twitter user posted. "Pete Hegseth going woke? What happened to the real America?" Even some military veterans took to social media to voice their concerns, questioning whether this was the right direction for the armed forces. "The military's job is to defend us, not run diversity workshops," one commenter wrote. Hegseth tried to clarify his stance, but the damage had already been done. His comments had thrown him into the crosshairs of the right-wing media establishment. Had he turned into a diet-woke liberal in a quest to stay relevant? Or was this a genuine attempt to modernize an institution that had long resisted change? As the media chaos surrounding Trump's confusion about his tariffs and Hegseth's comments about the military swirled around, the public began to wonder if there was something deeply symbolic about these two events. Trump had stumbled over his own policies, looking every bit the confused leader who had oversold an idea that he didn't quite understand. On the other hand, Hegseth, one of the leading conservative voices, was making startlingly progressive statements about military culture, leaving his followers questioning his commitment to traditional values. Was this a sign that both men were losing their touch? Were their once unshakable ideologies starting to crumble under the weight of modern complexities? The media, ever eager to stoke division, certainly thought so. But just when it seemed like these two stories would dominate the headlines for weeks, the tides shifted. Trump returned to his rallies, rallying his base with familiar promises and slogans, while Hegseth doubled down on his diet-woke military stance, claiming that the military could be both strong and progressive. Yet, the question lingered in the background. Were these men, once symbols of unyielding conservative power, now desperately searching for ways to stay relevant in a world that was moving forward in ways they hadn't anticipated? In the aftermath, both stories faded into the background, replaced by new controversies and headlines. Trump's tariff confusion and Hegseth's diet-woke military reform would eventually become just another chapter in the chaotic saga of American politics. But the question remained, were these mere missteps, or were they signs of something deeper? Could Trump's unchecked bravado finally be catching up with him? Could Hegseth's embrace of wokeness signal the end of the hard-edged conservative era? For now, no one knew for sure. But in the world of politics, one thing was certain: the contradictions and confusion were only just beginning.